think that's a great question. And I will say that because of the concept of that role or the position of the Dazzle, which is again, the director of artistic sign language versus American Sign Language, there's just different ways to look at it. I think there's still a lot up for discussion because it at this point is about perspective. So speaking for myself, when it comes to artistic sign language, it really is tied to the creativity, also the dramaturgy, the world that is being created for the show. And for example, I will use something from the movie CODA. So I was part of, well, I worked with the director, with Sean. And really, we sat down at the table over a meal and we went through the script because she also wrote it and I would sign the different lines in different ways to show and remind her that in this country, only because we are using American Sign Language in the United States, very specifically, there are still regional accents, right? There are still different ways to sign the same idea based on where you are. So I would give her the regional examples or show her what the line would look like. In the same way that hearing people know that a Boston accent is different than a New York City accent, than a Brooklyn accent, to a New Orleans accent, right? Like a hearing person knows that speech has those accents, but so does sign language. And in those discussions, in those kind of like conversations with Sean, we were able to hone in on what we wanted it to look like. We say artistic sign language for theater because it does require more dramaturgy, right? We look into it, we think about how we want to tell the story, what's our approach to storytelling, what do we want to have discovered amongst this family, for example, in the movie CODA, what's their collective truth? Because yeah, they are using American Sign Language in the film, but with all the things that we're paying attention to, that we want recognized, certain details that we want to convey, like how the furniture is set up in the house, you know, and that requires working with people on the creative side. And also as a Dazzle, talking about where does the TV go? Like deaf people would never set up a living room like this because their back is to the door and the TV has all the lights from the windows blinding them, right? Once you do all of those things and get that, you're still at a place where there's a lot of constant discussion around artistic sign language and American Sign Language. When we use artistic sign language for a movie or for theater, it just gives us more space to be able to explore the possibilities because we're creating a world, right? And in the world that we create, while American Sign Language is relatively a common language amongst everyone, it doesn't exist as the only one in the world, right? There's British Sign Language, there's French Sign Language, you have Italian Sign Language, right? There's a sign language essentially for every country in the world almost. And so if we're doing a piece that would require the use of British Sign Language and American Sign Language, we'd have to still figure out how to tell that story, especially if we want to honor BSL, right? It wouldn't want it to have too much American Sign Language. We have to think about how to honor the characters, how to honor their relationships, identify what that relationship looks like, what are the layers to their relationship, how do they communicate with each other. Let's say that the actor who is using BSL in the play has to communicate with somebody who doesn't know sign language. All these things have to be decided, right? And that's why it's artistic sign language instead of just a language being used, which would be American Sign Language or British Sign Language. I know that I could actually keep going on answering this question. You did ask for examples, so I will say one line from the poem in English. I'm going to sign it in English. It says, "Down the Mississippi." That's the line in English in the poem, right? But in American Sign Language, I would say, "Mississippi River, down it goes." And then artistic sign language, and this occurs in American Sign Language as well, because we do look at the kind of language as it stands as a phrase, but we also think of what is happening above it, below it, before it, after it, that kind of thing. But in artistic sign language for this poem, for this performance, what they mean is that they're gambling, right? And then on the water, it's like, does that mean they're swimming? No, right? Are they floating on a raft? No, they're not. And you have to think about that period, what fits for the aesthetics of that show, what's the vibe, what's the feel. What it ends up meaning is that it's a steamboat or a paddle boat. And you know what that engine looks like in the back, right? And so then because of that imagery, I have to incorporate it. So I'll sign river, there's the boat, there's the paddle in the back and the steam coming up. And so that's why it's artistic sign language, because in the group, we were able to kind of play, dance, and you know that scene in the show, they're gambling as well. They're doing that on the boat. The boat is their vehicle to be on the river. And so in that poem, there's this imagery that I use artistic sign language to convey to the audience. And so that way there is a picture there, and it is considering where they are in the show.